This video is sponsored by Dev Mountain. If you're interested in learning web development, iOS, or UX design, Dev Mountain is a 12-week design and development bootcamp intended to get you a full-time position in the industry. To learn more, visit devmountain.com or click the link in the description below. Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to my svelte.js crash course. So in this crash course, we're going to go over the basics, the fundamentals, how to get started, and we're going to build a small scoreboard application using Svelte. But before we do that, I just want to quickly talk a little bit about what Svelte is. Now, when you go to the website here, svelte.dev, it says cybernetically enhanced web apps, which I really don't like that description. It sounds way more complicated than what it really is. And what it actually is a JavaScript compiler. And it allows you to build user interfaces in a reactive way using an awesome syntax, a very simple syntax. It's not a framework, so if we go down here, it'll tell you that frameworks like React and Vue do the bulk of their work in the browser, while Svelte shifts that work into a compile step that happens when you build your app. Okay, so when you build your app, you just get clean vanilla JavaScript. You don't get all the stuff that a framework would give you. It also doesn't use a virtual DOM, like for instance React does. It says that it writes code that surgically updates the DOM when the state of the app changes. Okay, so I know that might be a little vague, but it'll make more sense as we move along. There is a REPL on the white website if you want to check that out. Basically, we just have a script tag here. We have a variable, and we can output that variable in curly braces. So it gives us really easy syntax like this to work with, and we can even add styling to our components. So if I want to do style, just like Vue.js, really. If we go H1 and we say color red, you'll see that it turns red. Now, as far as the output, the JavaScript output, it's just pure vanilla JavaScript. And this might look like a lot for a Hello World app. However, if you were to do a Hello World with Angular or React or any other framework, it's going to be a lot more code. We also have our CSS output as well. All right, now you could follow along within this REPL because you can create other files and stuff, but I'm going to generate a project using, let's make this smaller, using the Degit scaffolding tool. So down here you can see we can run npx degit and create a Svelte application. So I'm just going to copy this line right here, jump into my terminal, and I'm just going to change the name of it to svelte-scoreboard. Okay, and that's just going to create some files for us. Then we're going to cd into Svelte scoreboard, and I'm going to run VS Code in there. All right, so let's just take a look at some of the files before we run anything. So it has a rollup.config. Now, Rollup is a module bundler. It's similar to Webpack, so we can use this import syntax. We can create component-based applications. This is the config, so there's some options here. We have the input, which is going to be the main.js in the source folder. The output is going to be in public, and it's going to be bundle.js. Okay, it'll have source maps by default, but you can shut those off if you want. Down here, bundle CSS is the file that all your component level styling is going to get compiled to. Okay, and there's some other stuff as well. There's some plugins, Rollup plugins like Live Reload, which is used for our live server. So that's the config file for Rollup. Then package.json, we just have a bunch of Rollup plugins. We have Svelte, and then we have our build script, dev script, and so on. Okay, now the source folder only has two files. There's a main.js where it brings in the main app file, app.svelte, which is like your root app component, and then we pretty much initialize it to document.body. We pass in this prop. Okay, just an example to show you can pass in props. And if we look at app.svelte, we have our name variable, which is the prop that's being passed in. And the reason that it has an export is because it's passed in from another file. All right, then we have our style, and then we have our output, which is very similar to the demo, the REPL on the website. So the public folder, by default, just has an index.html. It's including the global CSS, which is this file here. So any global styles you want would go here, and I'm actually going to replace these in a minute. And then we have our bundle CSS, which is your component level styling. Okay, it'll get compiled to that. And then bundle.js is going to be basically your whole application, all your Svelte files. They're all going to be compiled into this JavaScript. Okay, and I'm just going to change the name of this title here to scoreboard. Okay, and then down here, let's go ahead and run npm install or npm I, because we need to install all the dependencies. Okay, and then once that's done, we're just going to do npm run dev. It's going to run it on localhost 5000. But if you look up in the public folder, it created the bundle.js file when we ran the server. And this is all just vanilla JavaScript. And it's very readable. It's not optimized and minified yet. That happens when we do npm Run Build. But for now, we can actually clearly see what's being compiled, or what it's being compiled to. And then bundle CSS is any component level styling. And you'll see we have the H1 purple that's coming from this right here. All right, and then we just have some source maps as well. So let's go ahead and open up our browser, and let's go to HTTP localhost 5000, and we just get hello world. Okay, so I'm gonna just make this smaller, make this a little smaller. And obviously this hello world is coming from this app file, this right here. All right, now I don't want the prop world to be passed in, so I'm just gonna completely get rid of that here. And if I save that, we'll get hello undefined. So we'll go back here, get rid of export, because we're not taking anything in. I'm just going to explicitly set it to John Doe and save, and we get hello John Doe. Now, as far as the application that we're going to build, it's going to be pretty simple. We're going to have some players with some points, a certain number of points, and ultimately I want to, I want to create an array of players, loop through them, output a players component. I want to be able to add new players and delete players, and also increment their scores. So pretty much just I want to cover components. I want to cover event handlers, conditionals, loops, all that stuff. All right, so let's continue on here. I'm going to create another variable called points. We're going to start off just with one player. All right, and then down here, let's get rid of hello and exclamation and just have the name in the H1, and then let's put an H3 with the points. So I save that. We get John Doe 100. Now I have some styling that I want to apply globally. So in public global CSS, I'm going to get rid of all this. And I just have a style sheet that I'm going to use, that I use quite a bit. And it's kind of like a mini bootstrap. It has like button classes and stuff like that. But I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then I'm just going to restart the server. All right, and you can see that the fonts changed, the margin and stuff like that. So back in our app.svelte, let's actually change the color of the H1. I'm going to use, in my global CSS, I have a primary variable. I'm just going to grab that. And I'll have all this code in the description, guys, if you want to follow along. We'll just change that. Let's see, why did that? Okay. And down here, I'm just going to add a little bit of styling. Let's just do a container. And in that container, let's do a card class. And then we'll just take these, move those into there. And there we go. All right, so let's look at event handlers. I want to have a couple buttons here that will increase and decrease the points. Okay, so under the H3, let's do a button. I'll give it a class of btn, and let's just say +1 for the text. And I'm going to add a click handler. And the way that we can do that with Svelte is do on:click. Now, obviously, this is not vanilla JavaScript. This is something that will get compiled through Svelte. It's a way for us to build reactive interfaces easily. So I'm going to set this to a function called add point. Okay, and then what I'll do is just copy this down, and let's have this one say -1, and this will call a function called remove point, And I'm just going to add a class of btn dark. All right, now these functions I'm going to assign up here, and we could do like function, like a normal function, but I'm going to use an arrow function. So I'm going to say const add point, and all I want this to do is take the points and plus equal 1. So basically increment it by 1, and then remove point is going to decrease it by 1. So we'll put a minus sign there and remove point. So we'll save, and now I can go ahead and increase the points and decrease them. All right, so a very small amount of code to be able to do that. Now, if we want to bind an input, we can do that as well. So I'll go underneath the button here, and let's do input. I'm going to make this a number, type number, get rid of the name and ID, and I want to bind it to the points value. So we can say bind colon value, and I'm going to set that to points. And you can use quotes too around the curly braces if you want. I prefer not to, but you can. So if I save that, we get 100. All right, and if I add to this, it's going to go ahead and change this too. All right, I'm just going to put some margin under that H3. So right here, say margin bottom, and this is only going to pertain to this specific component. All right, so that's that, binding values. Now let's take a look at conditionals. So I want to, let's see, what we'll do is create a variable here called show controls, and let's set that to false. So basically I only want to show this part, these controls, to change the points if this is true. So to do that, we can go down to, let's see, let's go right above the button, right below the H3, and we can open up some curly braces and do number sign if, and then show controls. So that's the opening part of this, and then to end it we just do slash if. So I'll save that, and now that should save it. There we go. So now it goes away. If I change this back to true, then it shows. All right, but I want to keep it at false and then create a button here to toggle it. So let's do that. Let's go in the H1 here. So I'll just put this on a separate line, and let's put a button here. We'll do btn and btn sm. Just make it a plus sign for now, and let's add a click handler, and let's call a function called toggle controls. And then we'll go up here and let's say const toggle controls, and we'll just set let's do, what is it, show controls. We're going to set that equal to whatever show controls is not, so the opposite. If it's true, it'll be false. If it's false, it'll be true. So let's save that. So now we have this button here, and if I click it, it'll open up the controls. If I click it again, it'll close them, so it'll just toggle. All right, now this plus sign, I want it to be a minus sign if the controls are open. So let's go to where we have the plus, which is right here. I'm just going to go on a different line in between this button here and just do a one-line if statement. So I'll say if show controls, then show a minus, colon else, then show a plus. Okay, so very simple. And now if I click it, you'll see it turns into a minus. All right, I'm actually going to add a label to this H3 of points, like that. Okay, now ultimately we're going to want multiple players, so we'll have a component for each player. But before we do that, let's create just a nav bar with just a title in it, just so I can show you how to create a separate component or a separate file and bring it in. So in source, I'm going to create navbar.svelte. Okay, you want to make sure you use the svelte extension. And I should have mentioned this in the beginning. You want to use the svelte Visual Studio Code extension if you're using VS Code, or else you're not going to have the syntax highlighting and all that. All right, so in this nav bar, there's not much we have to do. I'm just going to have a div with the class of nav bar and bg primary, and then inside there I'm just going to have an h1 and just say, let's say player scoreboard. And that's it. I don't have to do any kind of like export. I don't have to create any classes or anything like that. It's just simply the markup, and then I can bring it in up here. I can say import navbar from /navbar.svelte, and then I can put this wherever I want. So I'm going to go above the container and put in my nav bar. And there we go. It's simple as that to create a component and bring it in, or a module. Okay, so now, like I said, I want to have multiple players and have one of these output for each one. So let's create a new file in source called player.js svelte, and I'm just going to copy everything in app and paste it in, and then let's get rid of the navbar import. We're going to keep these variables, we're going to keep these functions, keep the styling, get rid of this navbar, also get rid of the container class because that doesn't belong in here, just the card. Okay, so we'll save that. Now let's go to our app file and let's bring in player. Okay, and then we don't need any of this right here. We don't need the styling because that's now going to be in the player component. And we can get rid of everything within the container like that. Now, here's where I want to put our main state for the players. So let's say let players equals an array. And actually, you know what? I'm just going to paste these in. All right, so we have some players here. And what I want to do is loop through the players and output, I don't know why I did that, output a player component for each one. So the way that we can loop through is with each. We can do $sign each, and we can say, actually, you know what, before we do that, let's do an if just to make sure that there are players, because if there's not, then we'll just have a message that says no players. So let's say if players dot length is equal to 0, then let's just do a paragraph and we'll say no players, and then we'll do an else, and let's just end that. And then within here is where we want to do our loop. So we're going to say each players as player, and then let's end that each. And for each one, we just want to output a player component. Now, if I save this, we get our components, but they all have just John Doe, because if we look in player, we just have that static data. So what I want to do is pass in, let's pass in the name, and that's going to come from player.name. Okay, we're iterating through and grabbing the name and the points. So this will be player.points. Now, just doing that isn't going to show any difference. We actually have to access them. So inside player, what we need to do is, instead of setting it here, we're going to do what the app component did in the beginning when it passed in that prop. We just had export like that. All right, so same thing here. We'll go ahead and clear this up and just set this to export. And if I save that now, we get all our different players with their different points, and we can change their points as needed, just like that. Okay. So next thing, let's make it so that we can actually add a player. So I'm going to create a whole new component here, a new file called add player.svelte. All right, so add player is going to be a form. Now I'm going to create a script tag up here, and I'm going to have an object for our form fields, which are going to be name, and it's going to be empty by default, and points, which I'm going to set to 0 by default. Okay, and then down here in our output, let's do a form. I'm going to give it a class of grid3, which is just part of my styling. Just puts all the inputs in a row on large screens. And then let's also, we won't do the submit just yet. Let's add the field. So we'll say input, type text, and let's do placeholder. And we'll say player name. And I want to bind the value to that player object name value. Okay, and I'll copy this down. We're going to do the same for points. Let's make this a number type though. And we'll bind this, whoops, we'll bind this to player dot points, and then let's have an input, input with the type of submit, and let's say value add player, and let's just add a class. Class is going to be btn and btn dash primary. Okay, so we have our form. Let's just get this displayed on the page. So if we go to our app file, I'm going to just copy this down, and let's bring in add player. Okay, and then we want to put this right inside the container like that. Okay, so now we have our form. Now in order for this to work, we need to basically emit or dispatch up a value or an event so that we can add to this list of players that's in the app.svelte. So inside add player, the way that we do this is we use something called create event dispatcher. So we want to bring that in from Svelte. So we're going to say import create event dispatcher, and that's going to be from Svelte. And then what we have to do is initialize a variable called dispatch and set that to create event dispatcher. Now we need to have an on submit for this form, so we do it just like we did with the click, except we do on submit, and I'll have this go to a function called on submit. Okay, and we'll create that right here. We'll say const on submit. It's going to take in an event parameter, and we want to e.prevent default, and then we want to dispatch an event which I'll call add player, all lowercase, and I want to send the player data, okay, because this player data is going to be filled with the form, whatever's in the form. And then I want to clear that form after, so I'll simply just take player and just reset it to nothing and points 0. All right, so this is going to dispatch add player. Now, in order to catch this, and this is probably going to give us reference error create is not defined. Reference create is not defined. Import create. Oh, this should be a lowercase c. There we go. Okay, so once we fill this in and click add player, it's going to dispatch add player. So we have to catch that in app.svelte right here. So we'll say on : add player, all lowercase, and set that to call a function called add player, camel case. And then we'll create that up here. And let's use an arrow here. So this will take in an event parameter. Now the way that we get the data that's passed in is e.detail. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just create const new player to e.detail. Now to add the player, we can't simply push onto it. It's not going to be reactive that way. It's similar to if you're using React, you can't just push onto your state. You have to basically copy it and or recreate it. So because it's immutable. So what we'll do here is there's a few ways you could do it. We could use concat, but I like to just use the spread operator. So actually we don't need const. We want to take players. So players is this right here, this array, and we're going to set it equal to an array, and we want to spread across the current players, and we want to add our new player. All right, so let's try that out. So if we go up here, we'll say Kevin Jackson points 500 and add, and there we go. Kevin gets added. We can mess with his points. Obviously, it's not going to stick if I reload because we're not actually saving to a database or anything like that. But you can see that this is pretty easy and it's pretty clean. So let's make it so we can actually delete a player now. And what I'd like you to do is pause the video and try to do this on your own, because it's pretty much stuff we've already done. You want to have a delete button. You want to have an on-click handler. When you click it, have it call a function, and then dispatch up, and then call a function here to delete a player from the list using filter or something like that. So if you want to go ahead and take a shot at it, pause the video, do it, you can go ahead and do that now. All right, so I'm going to go into my player.svelte, and we're going to bring in our, actually I'll just copy from add player these two lines, because we're going to need to call dispatch, because our state, our players are in the component above us. So we'll bring that in, and then let's go, let's see, I'm going to go into the H1. So we have our button to basically toggle, but let's go underneath that. Let's say button, we'll do BTN danger to make it red. And I'll just make it an X mark, and let's do an on click. Yeah, we'll do on click. Now what I could do here, instead of creating a function above, I could actually just do like an arrow, and then just, actually it messes up if I do that. For some reason, I think it's prettier that messes it up, but it just gives me issues. So I'm just going to call, what should I call this? On delete. Because you could just put an arrow function and call dispatch directly, but I'll just do this up here. So we'll say const on delete, and we want to dispatch, let's see, we'll dispatch an event called remove player. Now, as far as the data, we don't have IDs, it's just name and points, so we'll just delete by the name. In a real application, you're going to want to use an ID, some unique identifier, but we'll just use the name. So that'll dispatch remove player, so let's save that. Well, let's also give this button a class of btn sm. There. Okay, so now in our app.svelte, let's go to the player component, and let's say on remove player, and we'll set that to a function called remove player. And we'll go up here and create that. So const remove player takes in event parameter, and I'm just going to set players equal to the players array, and I'm going to filter through it, and let's say for each player we want to set player.name is not equal to e.detail, because remember that's how we get the data that's passed in. All right, so let's try that out. We'll save and go over here, and let's try to delete Sam Smith. He goes away, goes away. Now it says no players. I could add something here. We'll say just Greg, 200 points, add. All right, cool. So, I mean, I think that's going to be it, guys. Hopefully this gives you an idea of how to build user interfaces with Svelte. I know this is a really simple application, but I like it. I like the syntax. I like that it's not an actual framework and it doesn't have all the bulk on top of it. What I'm going to do now is just run, let's close this up and let's do Npm Run Build. And obviously, if you had a back end, some kind of API, you'd be making, just make your fetch requests inside your functions here. But now let's look at bundle.js now, and it looks much, much different. Okay, it's all compact and optimized. And I can simply now go to, let's see, I'm just going to go to my, where did I create this? I just want to open the folder. Actually, I'll just do this. Let's see, I want to go to public in my Finder. So in public, we now just have an index.html, and if I open that up, there's the application with all the functionality. All right, so that's going to be it. I know this was a small application, but hopefully it gives you an idea of how this stuff works, how Svelte works, and hopefully you can create some of your own applications. But I really like it. I want to do a larger project with Svelte, so look forward to that. Probably on YouTube, but maybe even a course, who knows. But hopefully you enjoyed this. If you did, please leave it a like. And again, I'll have all the code in the description if you need that. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.